managers that spend 80% of their time managing these low performers. When you do that, I mean, it's such a mistake, right? When you do that, guess what happens to your high performers that don't get any attention?
The biggest gap that I see is the fact that you have employees working for your company who don't understand the health of your organization.
There was no quantitative versions of this 9-box exercise. This was based on people sitting in the room and deciding who goes in which box.
Welcome to the HR Misfits, the podcast about leadership decisions most organizations get wrong, told from the HR seat that actually sees the fallout. We're business-minded, human-centered, and just bold enough to challenge the people systems that no longer work, where polished playbooks end and real leadership begins. We're the HR leaders who've been in the room when things get messy, political, or uncomfortable, leading with heart, grit, and a little bit of sass. If you believe HR should be a catalyst, not corporate theater, and leadership should actually work for humans, you're in the right place. Let's get into it.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the HR Misfits. We are so glad you're here. I wish sometimes that our listeners could be a part, like a fly on the wall in the conversations we have right before we hit record, because we just are at our own party having a great time. Today, we are talking about the anti-framework. And we have just some good stuff we're going to get into today about this. Before we start digging into actual frameworks that we want to pick apart, there's a couple things I'll just kick off and say. One is we are not actually like fully anti-framework. We are unquestioned frameworks. Like maybe we should just ask some questions about whether a framework that we've been using for X amount of years still makes sense to us. So again, not anti-framework. In fact, we're going to talk a little bit later about the HR Misfits Collective, our own proprietary framework. So we're not anti-framework all the way. We're just anti-unquestioned framework. So we want to dig into that a little bit today. Latoya is going to kick it off. We're going to talk about one of, HR's one of our most favorite tools in the toolbox, the good old 9-box. Latoya, what do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, we might as well. If we're going to talk about frames, we start with the OG framework, which is the 9-box. So for all of those of you that are HR, I'm sure you've heard of this. If you haven't and you just heard, if you're not in HR and you heard of it and just wondered, like, what could that possibly be? It is the OG framework. It's one of the old school. In fact, in research, found out that it actually was created in 1970 by GE. So at the time, this was probably like very groundbreaking type of like HR tools. Like they probably were knocking it out the box by creating a tool like that. But what it is, it's a matrix that you've got two axes, right? Performance and potential. Now, when I came into the HR game 20 something years ago, this was still a hot ticket item. I kept thinking to myself when I would hear it, because I was in recruiting, right? So we weren't really talking about, we were just being put in the boxes. I always wanted to know what was in the middle, because I'm like, I could figure out, like, okay, if you got the axes, like I could get behind, like, okay, there's probably like a top right. Like I'm thinking like a SWOT analysis, but 9 just seems excessive. Like I could not, and it was a mystery because outside of HR, you don't talk about what the 9 boxes are. Like, and I didn't have Google, right? So I didn't know who to go ask. Nobody wanted to talk about it. It's very secretive. So then when I got behind the curtain, it was like, oh, okay. I stand by that. Most of the boxes completely unnecessary. Like the middle is very, very, it's like kind of has potential or a little bit more potential than the person on the box below that, but then maybe could grow a little bit. Just lots of weird words to say the same thing 9 different times when the reality is it is a tool to literally, it's a framework, literally to put people in a box, to force fit people in a box and say, here's where we think you should fit in terms of your performance and potential.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
It is to me, this is probably when I started to enter into misfit territory where I was like, why would we do this? And people were just like, that's just what we do. It's it's part of the talent agenda. It's the talent process. We have to do it every single year.
We were taught this years ago and we just keep doing it since the 1970s,
You know what? Everyone goes in a box. This is groundbreaking, right?
And I agree with you. Put your people in the boxes.
Latoya, the exercise is to write names in a box. That's all you need to know. Yeah.
I feel like I just had a thought pop on my head, Marcy, that said, that was like, nobody puts baby in a corner.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It just came in.
See,
I'm a
love
Dirty
that,
Dancing fan.
The movie references, first I was like, nobody talks about Fight Club. And then I was thinking about the scene where he's like, what's in the box?
Oh my gosh.
But like, yeah, it's true. And I agree with you, Latoya. I mean, all these ideas, they get created and they're great ideas at the time, right? And they make sense at the time and somebody comes up with it. But after a while, it's like, okay, but when do we get to a place where we call it and say, this is now becoming outdated? This is not really a sign of the times. Or it doesn't really sound very pleasant to put our people in a box. Like, are we doing them a service by putting them in a box?
Right.
Yeah.
Is legal okay with the boxes?
Is legal okay with this? I mean, it does make sense. Like in the beginning, I get where the whole like premise came from. We want to be able to evaluate talent. We like, systems or tools like this that help, I guess, in a way, like simplify it. So I understand the premise behind it. But the biggest concern or fear is exactly what we're saying. We're actually purposely putting people in a box. And by the way, I mean, is it easy for people to get out of that box and move to the next box? Or do they just permanently stay in that box for their entire existence at the company? Number one. And number two, how do we ensure that bias doesn't just creep in when we're putting people in these boxes?
It's almost impossible not to. The idea of categorizing people, no matter what, is the essence of bias. Because at least in my experience, and maybe in more recent times, so we'll get to that, but in the earlier times, there was no quantitative versions of this 9-box exercise. This was based on people sitting in the room and deciding who goes in which box.
Yes.
And of course, you don't intend, just like most biases are unconscious. You don't go in that with it. But the concept of the activity is take a list of your people and tell me based on your assessment which box that they belong in. The concept of it is riddled in unconscious bias. Like you have no choice, and I have to make a decision. Because one of the things I remember being told to me too is like, to Marcy's point, you don't put everybody in the box. Like there are no people that nobody can be left outside the boxes. So even if I just feel like, well, what if I want? Because I remember saying, I think to a leader that was kind of like I was shadowing. Well, what if I wanted to put like Marcy, Amy, and Kermit the Frog, all of my people in one box? Oh no, you can't put everybody in one box. Like that's not differentiated. Okay, well all of this just did not seem logical to me, because at the end of the day, what are we going to do with this?
That's
this is how we assess potential. I was like, this is not how you assess potential. This is how you categorize potential. Yes. That is not how you actually assess potential.
And I think too, kind of like the Magic Quadrant a little bit with Gartner, it's like the 9-box is, depending on the company that you're with that's using this tool. I've seen companies too that it's not just about like being in the box. There's even like, it even gets deeper. Where in the box are they?
Oh,
are
yeah,
they just on the
section,
right?
That's next level.
That is next level stuff. I'm like, this is way too complicated.
Sitting in a room talking about that for hours. Like
I can't.
Just the idea of that.
Just like, oh my gosh.
I've lived it. It's not. It's very keen in my imagination because it happened in real life.
Because it's not in my imagination. It's an actual reality.
Yeah, and before we had all these cool technology rooms, right? Like we were doing this on those rip-off white paper post-it things, and then with post-its, right? Like your people.
Yeah, I feel that pain. I remember doing that, and like you walk around the room, and then as people would put like a little question mark. Oh, I have a sticky on this person. There's like 25 stickies, and you're just like, oh my God, I'm going to find me a time machine so I can go back in time and yell at my 18-year-old self to pay attention in school, because otherwise this is where you're ending up. But
this is what I decided to do with my MBA, is to go put stickies on a large Post-it.
That's what we do.
But it's true. And then you get to this place where, then people start asking questions, and as they should. But Latoya, to your point, this does encourage recency bias. It absolutely, makes people feel confused. And from the talent perspective, the feedback they get is like, well, then what do I do to get out of the upper right quadrant into the into the other side of the box, right? Like, what am I doing here? So yeah, it's just, these are things that, as the businesses have matured, external factors, which then obviously inform internal factors. It's just too infrequent. It becomes too infrequent for today's pace. Like, we have to be thinking more in more modern terms. And we also have to be able to tell talent specifics around these things. So your example, LaToya, it's so spot on in terms of such an outdated framework that although it had great intentions and probably was ahead of its time in the 70s, it's like, okay, but can we agree that, putting people in a box isn't relevant today? Like, it's not going to land. It's not going to assist anyone. It's not going to help the organization. So yeah, that one, I think that one's such a great example.
It's one of the ones, and I was very excited when I started seeing the boxes fall apart, right? So then we got down to like a 4 box. Okay.
The core 4
being made. So now we're like at a core 4. So now it's okay. At least this makes a little bit more sense. You got the top right. It's like high potential, high performer, low potential, low performer. Like, which ones that do you kind of put people in? Still trying to operate within boxes, but there's less boxes. So we're making progress. So I like
step
that
in the right
part.
direction.
I was moving in the right direction.
Exactly.
And I would say from my own experiences to Marcy's point, what I've also seen evolve is how do we determine what that is? So it's less about LaToya, Marcy, and Kermit the Frog. Like, I'm on this really big like Muppets kick. As
I noticed.
Use that a couple more times.
But where's Miss Piggy? You haven't mentioned her yet. I'm waiting for Fraggle Rock or Miss Piggy or something.
It's coming. Hold on. But to say it's not just what I feel like Marcy's a superstar.
Right.
Okay. Now the conversations have evolved as our leaders have evolved. The thinking has evolved to ground this in like actual quantitative and qualitative things that can be measured. Like, what is driving potential? Like, there are a lot of organizations that have actual high potential like assessments. So it's not, I'm just assuming that they're a rock star because last week they did something awesome. And now I decided when I got into this conversation, they go in the top right box. These are based on other factors, and we can drive the conversations a little bit differently to say, okay, if you are doing this, then it should be based on these specific measures that you say, okay, if I could say yes to 90% of this, then the outcome is likely that they belong in that part of the matrix.
Yes. It's less.
And the other thing is, what's the next step? Once you know, or you think you know, what box somebody goes in, okay, then what?
So what?
That's the issue. Right. Like, you do the exercise, you're in the box. And then I think the biggest gripe that a lot of employees have is like, okay, you're doing these exercises as leaders, and HR, we're sitting with the leaders doing them, but we walk away from that exercise and we ask those questions and say, well, is that an exercise just in busy work, or does that actually lead to outcomes in your organization? Are you using that information to say, okay, LaToya, we agree, high performer, high potential. Okay, that's great. But what are we going to do to help LaToya, one, stay satisfied in her role, or two, think about development pathways for LaToya? Does she have coaching? Does she have a mentor? What are things that we agree that LaToya, wants in her career? And what can we do to help her solve for things that we feel we need to close the gap so that she gets there quicker? People who are underperformers. Okay, what are we doing with that information? Do we feel that there's still investment in them? Or are we feeling like, hey, maybe we need to have a clear conversation around underperformance in our organization and not just keep people in a box? Because you're also doing them a disservice, because if you don't feel that they have the runway for potential, then are you literally just going to keep them in your organization sitting there year after year questioning, hey, am I ever going to reach out of this box? It's like, no, the answer is no. Let's be honest and tell you that so you can make the informed decision if you're satisfied with this or you belong external. And that's what happens sometimes with these frameworks. And
I love that you started that conversation, Marcy, or that explanation with focusing on the person that is the high performer and the high potential, because oftentimes what we see is managers that spend 80% of their time managing these low performers. When you do that, I mean, it's such a mistake, right? When you do that, guess what happens to your high performers that don't get any attention? I mean, they're going to walk because we're not doing exactly what you mentioned. We're not working with them on development opportunities, making sure that they're, still feeling challenged in the role that they're in. And when we don't do that, they leave, because we've spent 80% of our time with the people in the bottom left-hand nine box, you know?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I would say too, like, so there's two things you said, Marcy, that really stuck out to me. I'll start with where Amy just picked up on is I've seen both ways. And I think former employment was really played towards high potentials more. Like, I actually think we spent a disproportionate amount of time when you were if you were considered a low performer, it was more of like, it was a matter of time. Like there was a, if you were going to manage it. Now most of the leaders in that time would actually be trying to figure out how can they avoid having to go through the performance improvement plan, which is to improve performance. Different topic that just came to my head. We should probably talk about performance improvement plans, and like that's a framework that probably needs to go out the window too.
Oh, it's coming.
Yeah, right. Different thing. But we have a ton of programs. We would put you through 16 leadership development programs aside and all of that. And it's like, but there were these people that are like, this is a solid performer and someone who maybe they're not going to be the next C-suite person or have no aspiration to do that. But like, to be honest, those are the people that are going to hold you down. Like, your high potential people, they're not probably going to stay not only in this box, in this role, in this team, maybe in this company. They're high potential, high performers to a lot of people, including to the external market. Yes. So you can over index in that space because say, oh, but these are our superstars, right? Superstars are superstars no matter where you put them. So be mindful of invest in them and have a plan 100%.
Yes.
But also, they're probably leaving in the next 18 to 24 months. So these people that are solid, that need to continue to invest in their performance, but then they kind of like are just sitting there and then it's like, oh, okay, that's great. Let's just focus on this or the low performance. And so that's one of the things, that's where the actions go. And I feel like that group of people that are solid performers is just like, I think people used to call them things like Steady Eddie and like
Steady Eddies.
Steady Eddies.
Have issues with that anyway.
We're sunsetting that term.
They'll just be there. It's just assumed they'll just be there and they're fine.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the assumption, right? And I remember early in my career, I was actually called that. I was, doing a
Steady Eddie?
High pressure job. Yeah, I was young. I think I was in my early 20s. I told you guys know this. I've had so many different careers at this point, like different things that I tried. And like, I worked really hard. And when you're young, you're like, oh, I got to grind, right? I got to do the things. And I remember somebody said to me like, oh, well, Marcy, we know that you'll handle things, like we'll give you things to do because, you're our steady Eddie. And I remember in that moment, even in my 20s being like, I'm insulted. This is like, hold on a second. I was like, oh no, I'm a doormat. Like, this is not good. And I left, and I left. And I remember thinking, this is not the compliment that you think it is, so I love that.
Why wasn't it Steady Betty instead of Steady Eddie? Can somebody?
That's right.
I mean,
whatever.
Because it was part of the 9 box that was created in 1970.
At GM in 1972. That's why. Okay, got it. Yeah, now I'm with it.
Back when they were sitting on the desk smoking in the office with their
drinks. Oh my gosh,
you're my steady.
She wasn't even in the conversation at that point. That's why, because she wasn't being assessed. They just assumed she couldn't do anything else. That's why equity had not entered in the picture.
That is so true.
By the way, I wouldn't mind having a little glass of whiskey on my desk too when I'm working, but. Yeah,
like, can we bring that back? We're going to sunset the 9 box, but we're going to bring back the whiskey at work.
Let's see what we could circle back to. I know we reflect that, but I'm going to circle back to those practices.
I love this dialogue because it's so spot on. And one of the things that I hear the biggest gripe about outside of the 9 boxer is the annual performance, because it's so
let's talk about
it's so connected into that. Because I had a few people reach out to me saying it's just so ambiguous, and so that's the other piece that I think people just get to this place where they just want honesty and they want a modern shift. They're like, I understand this is how we've used to do things, and maybe that worked in the past, right? But LaToya, your conversation around this, I think, is such a great segue, because it's like that was a sign of the times, and we get that. But roles have evolved. The technology has evolved. Matrixed organizations, cross-functional partnerships. There's so much that goes into these conversations where even the skill set starts to evolve. And people are saying like, okay, but who am I really being compared to, or how am I really being rated? And these frameworks sometimes, although they're perfect for just in time. What I notice is that it's like they're too infrequent. The dialogue becomes too infrequent.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of times people get shocked even as well with annual performance ratings. I know this is a big one where they say, I was shocked by my rating because I've only had one conversation with my people leader throughout the year.
And it was in July at the mid-year. Like, are you kidding?
It's like,
and by the time I have my year end, it's actually March of the next year. So I don't even remember what we talked about.
It's like, what did we talk about last year? I don't remember. And as HR, and the two of you are like knee deep in this, right? With you know, your roles. You probably hear this so often. Like people are saying, you know, like, can I talk about my rating? And this was always for me. I know when I worked in my past company, I was like, oh God, I would cringe when people put time on my calendar to talk about their rating.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, I'm going to tell you, Marcy, you say that both of us have that experience. I had that experience, but
Did you?
This is one of the joys of, you know, being the head of HR for a mid-sized tech company, that I have a great CEO that's like, you know, what do you think that is best for the employees and best for the company? And so when I pitched this whole blowing up the whole annual performance review process, I didn't get a lot of pushback, you know? So, I blew that up.
This is
really,
the point
truly.
Where I want to make sure I see if the emojis work, because I think you deserve a hand clap,
like a thumbs up, a clap,
figure out to put
something.
hands up, because kudos to you, because I have so much admiration for these organizations, like, and the HR leaders out there that have influence and actually moved over the line to get out of this annual performance review.
Agreed.
So,
well, Latoya, let's also admit, though, it's a little easier for me to do that in the type of, I'm in tech, right? So I'm in a mid-sized tech organization, and those types of changes are easier to make in these types of employment situations, right? But I mean, being an enterprise, it's a lot tougher.
People trying to convince the company how we're going to
much tougher
pay people. And what's interesting is, you know, I've worked for one of the largest companies in the world, and then pretty much all large companies. But even at the time, I mean, we were still having this conversation. And what it always came back to is, but then how would we differentiate pay? And so it's like, if that's the problem we're trying to solve, then let's focus on that. But instead, we just keep defaulting back to the performance review process, because it makes it easier to try to tie pay and performance. Yeah. And the thing is, no, it didn't matter. Like, I have been in so many of these conversations over the last decade. There have been benchmarks. The flavor of every consulting firm has already decks on the shelves about how you can break out of this, but it is uncomfortable. Let's be honest. It's a huge change. If GE came up with the 9-box in 1970, the performance reviews probably go back to like when you were probably like getting like a pigeon version of it. Like, there's always been some type of process. Framework around performance reviews, and that is what would then tie to compensation. So I think that these two are like in some type of weird golden handcuff situation together, and it's hard for organizations to wrap their brain around, like, how would we differentiate pay if we didn't tie it to performance? Now, I've seen some really, really good things, and Amy, you could probably talk to some degree about that. Like, most of the companies that have gotten away from annual performance reviews still pay their employees through this. It's other ways to do it, and I think
it's still based on performance, right?
Yeah, it's still based on. You just don't have this tedious process of, again, trying to fit it into a framework, a timeline, and all those other things.
And it goes back to what we talked about with the 9-box. It's like, what are you doing with an annual performance management process? You are putting people in a box. The box of it meets expectations, the box of exceeds, or if in some companies, the box of super exceeds, depending on if you have a 3 or 4 or 5 or 6
ratings. When that entered into the chat, I'm like, oh, come on.
And let's be honest, the impact of that on employees is really what made me blow this whole thing up.
And I'm glad you did.
I'm telling you, we've seen it. We've seen employees go home and say, I stewed all night because on my self-evaluation thought I was a super exceeds, and you only put me as an exceeds. And now I'm doubting everything I've ever done in my whole existence. Like, honestly, like your value at work, not at work, whatever, is not tied to a 3.0, a 4.2, a 4.8, or whatever the rating system is. It's wild behavior. And also, I know, I'm sure you guys have seen it. I have seen where, again, not where I'm at right now because we don't have this, but I have seen in a previous lives, actually more than one employers, where managers, no joke, will back into the number to get the rating that matches that number for the employee that they want to get. So in other words, they'll have their form and say, oh, on this section is a 3 and a 4 and a 5. And then at the very bottom, it's like, oh, it's a 3.9. Oh, shoot. I really wanted them to be a 4.2. So let me go back and see where I can adjust. Are you kidding me? We're just messing with the numbers to get the outcome we want. Then what's the point of the form?
Ranking.
Exactly.
It's forced ranking. And that is 100% what employees call us out on, is they say, you know, you can't sit there and say that there's, you know, not a forced ranking process. It's like, of course there is. There's a distribution curve. There's absolutely something that we have to look at there. But it creates unhealthy competition. It creates these behaviors. I remember I had an employee say to me, like, we gave them a strong rating. And I remember, you know, we were able to find a little bit more money for the employee. And I remember the employee saying, oh, I would have rather, you know, a higher rating than the compensation. I was like, listen, I was like, this is a wild conversation. I said, but they get so, it's such a psychological aspect where they feel like, but what this has done though, is it's not only does it focus on the bias, which, you know, LaToya, 100%, like, I feel like you and I could talk about that all day, but what it also does is it creates this like unhealthy, you know, this mechanism where it's this like gaming the system versus actually having tangible feedback, where we've moved into, oh, well, somebody's really great. They had a great year. And when you ask them specifics, I'm like, you're describing tasks. You're describing a task. You're not actually telling me the impact they had. And that is where sometimes this model and this framework goes wrong, is because we reward busy. And it's like, oh, I can't give them a strong rating. They have to get exceptional because they did so much this year. I'm like, yes, but what impact
so much.
did they have?
They went above and beyond.
Yes. It's just, it ends up being, this is like I said, this is another one where it becomes this like forced rank conversation. And then you tie the compensation into it, and that creates an even, you know, bigger issue. But Amy, I would say, to LaToya's point, like, don't downplay. We understand like where you are. It's a smaller, mid-sized organization, but that influence I feel that you had in order to really look at this and say, hold on, like, we need to make this change. Even if the smaller to mid-sized companies are able to adopt a different situation here and differentiate this, I think kudos.
We got to start somewhere, right?
All of us.
We have to start somewhere.
Because I think your companies like yours are the ones that are helping to reinforce the proof that it is possible. Like, it is not, and what that looks like, because, and a lot of us know, like, people will not jump on board like that. A lot of people don't like to be first adopters. I don't know if I want to do that, but you see smaller, more agile companies that have influenced lots of changes in how organizations run just in general. And I think this is one. So it's slowly, the adoption has picked up, but it definitely started with smaller companies. I think where larger enterprise companies, like where I have been, are struggling is that piece of, like, number one, if I really get serious, the root cause of the problem is because we need to teach leaders how to lead. And so it's a crutch into this process, because if I can fit it into a framework, if I can tie it to something very specific that, like, you just have to do, then that takes away from the things like, you need to actually talk to your employees throughout the year about how things are going.
Yes,
that's right.
You didn't put that on my calendar, and I didn't give you a deadline and send you 16 workday notifications that said that you needed to fill this in. And so, but when I do that, everybody does it. Now, help me understand, like, why you can't do that organically. Let's just be honest. That's a leadership development gap. And it's like, I've coached on that and also advocated for that as an HR leader, to say, two things can be true at the same time. We can continue to work towards a system or some framework, maybe not this one, please, but
right.
that it moves us away from annual performance review. But the root cause of the problem really lies in the fact that if we had strong leaders, this would be a non-conversation. I tell people that work for me, every as a leader, if the actual year-end conversation is the first time you heard anything, then my performance should be questioned.
That's right.
Because I'm not doing my job. That is the role of a leader. And so, but a lot of leaders were not, first of all, a lot of leaders weren't trained, let's be honest. And so,
that's right.
Let alone are they held accountable to the fact that they need to do these things. And look, I remember in the company that Marcy and I worked together, I think we got real fun with it. Like we tried to do it like through a text message campaign. Like, can we automate people's reminders to go talk to your employees? Like the list that we tried to go to try to get people to do that.
Like it was like the corporate polite version of be like, do your damn job. Like it was just, it was like, exactly. but it's so accurate because it's true. Like go back to my earlier point. I said, the amount of people who have called me recently, even with this conversation saying, I didn't get this feedback throughout the year, and they point blank ask me, Marcy, we know your role and what you used to do. We need to know, does force ranking happen? What am I going to do? Say no? I'm going to lie to them? I'm not going to lie. Right. Yes, it does. It absolutely does. And it shouldn't be a shock to people that has to happen. There's only so much pot of money that, it's like, look, we would love to expand the pot. We would love to, fund the pot, but you have to understand that it's your individual performance. It's also the business, the health of the business. So LaToya, another beautiful point. One, leaders, absolutely not fully and well trained on these things. But two, the biggest gap that I see is the fact that you have employees working for your company who don't understand the health of your organization.
Oh gosh. Like you've been living my life this week.
I was just going to say, didn't we talk about that before we hit record?
It's why is that a shock? Why is that such a surprise? And it's like, again, this is where the people leaders, that conversation has to happen. And again, maybe it's in these 4-box conversations. I don't know. But in that conversation, you're saying, okay, I have LaToya, I have Amy, amazing, high potential. We see them, future CEOs. We say, okay, great. What are we doing to help Amy and LaToya understand the health of the organization? How does this business get led? Do they understand P&L? Do they understand the external drivers and factors? Yes, they're not going to be finance leaders, but that's very much part of the conversation. So no employee should be shocked when there's downsizing, when these things happen, because they're like, wow, we're seeing what's happening with our company stock. We understand that, wow, we've made a lot of cuts to our budget, which means some of our products in our portfolio is not knocking it out of the park. These are the conversations that I think don't happen. And
no doubt about it.
Aren't equipped to do that. One, because they're probably swamped and busy, but two, we've never thought about those things. We just said we need to rank everybody performance wise. What does good look like? We agree. Cool. High five. And there was never more detail around that.
Isn't it funny too, Marcy, where exactly what you're saying translates into, again, every company I've been at where you do these engagement surveys and the top things that come back, right?
That's another one.
It's always benefits and comp is on the top of the list. Training and development's on there and leadership transparency. So when we talk about leadership transparency, it's like, well, leadership really never tells us how the company's doing. Actually, we do that. We do it every single time in an all hands meeting. But the gap is exactly what you're talking about, Marcy. We throw up a slide. We expect everybody to understand what that slide means, even though we've never educated 85% of you on what any of that stuff means. But we expect you to translate that into now we've been transparent with you as leaders because we put it on a slide in an all hands meeting. But we didn't tell you what any of that stuff meant.
Right. Like it's like, welcome to the all hands meeting. So now we're going to play alphabet soup. The EPS was this, and then the OpEx, and people are like, what are you talking about? Like, like what it goes into it. Like, and it's like, I'm not trying to question people's intelligence. This is not how people talk every day. Like, let's be honest. Like, if you're not in finance or probably in the C-suite, and I'd argue some of them probably too, do not understand like what these numbers, and it's one slide. If you're lucky, it's once a quarter that we might put it up. And there are some organizations not even doing that anymore. They're like, just listen to the earnings call. Oh yeah. Sitting there listening to 200 investors talk about the alphabet suit is much more clear than it was. And then you're telling someone that is a automation engineer on the floor that has never been in one of these finance conversations, we just talked about that in the all hands meeting for 16 seconds and you didn't walk away understanding the company performance. No, they did. And also, by the way, at the end of the year, if you have any well-intentioned, these like cheerleading sessions about how awesome we've been all year and thank you for all the things, I understand the sentiment behind that from a communications perspective. Right. But let's be honest, again, fast forward, here we are in February, March of every year. And people are like, first of all, I don't even remember what you talked about in the fourth quarter. Right. But I do see that my bonus is not what I thought it was going to be, or the profit sharing for the company is not what I thought.
So now I'm paying attention.
Exactly. I really feel I was always so passionate about that. And the best leaders I had were the ones that helped me understand that. You know, I was like, look, I'm in HR, but at the same time, I'm like, I do need to know these things. I'm literally a part of a leadership team. I need to understand how this works, you know? Yeah. And I remember I had a really amazing leader who took me aside and was like, Marcy, you know, there's this class I'm going to send you to. And it was like a business acumen course. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm going to finally understand. And you know what? And it's not, you just need to know enough to be able to say,
of course,
I can connect the dots here.
Correct.
So this way it's not a complete shock, because yes, while I had a great year of individual performance, the impact is the conversation. How did you help drive impact in the organization? How did the organization do? Did they meet their goals and objectives? Here were the very specific goals and objectives. Here's the bottom line profit that we made. Oh, wow. Okay. Yes, we crushed it, or no, we didn't. Okay. This means this affects me, right? That's it's specific terms, right? That's all they need to know. But instead we've made these convoluted frameworks where we make it seem like, oh, this is top secret information, guys. You can't know behind the curtain. And it's like,
if you don't know the code to these acronyms, you're just not going to be able to follow.
You're not getting in the club. Sorry.
Not getting in the club.
I'll tell you. So shout out to Amy. You probably won't even remember this, but Amy did her master's degree well before I did. And I don't know, we probably were just like having lunch or something. No, you sent me a book, or you didn't send it to me. You recommended a book because you were talking about, there was a book about like HR managers, like business or for HR managers or something like that. And it was a similar conversation. Like, I don't even know what these people are talking about half the time, but like, I really want to like jump the line and go into like more, I can't follow along in these conversations. You recommended this book. So again, I'm sure that was probably 15 years ago, and there's probably lots of versions, but
you do?
Gosh, Amy has the book. So let me say, maybe when we release this, we could put it up on that, like, shout out to whoever wrote the book. But as an HR leader, like, if you are, and anyone, it was like, but this is something that I agree, like, you have got, like, it does help. Because even in these conversations, because inevitably, like, the unfortunate part of my week, which these ladies heard before the show and throughout the week as I was complaining in pieces, it's been really difficult, because when you have these every year at this time, shout out to all the people in the trenches, right? Like, we know that we're going to have these tough conversations. And so it starts with the employees. They get their performance. They're not happy. They call HR. We can't do anything about it, but we listen.
Yeah.
What I found is, like, I am trying to have some of these conversations with employees to help them understand. But in order to do that, I have to understand it.
Exactly.
You know, fast forward, I actually got an MBA for similar reasons, because I was like, this is going to make me a very different HR leader.
That's right.
I was the only HR person in that entire cohort, but it was awesome because I learned a lot in how to have these conversations. But I'm also still like, I remember being the person in the meeting being like, what are they talking about? So when I talk to other people, my team, people that are coming to me saying, I'm so confused about, like, how did we get here and what's happening with the company, I can talk to them like regular people, not like the finance syllabus that I got in business school, and then being like, I don't expect you to be able to look at a balance sheet. But as an HR leader who hires other HR leaders, if you don't know how to do that, read this book.
Exactly.
Watch a YouTube video.
I told you I had this on my shelf. It is called Financial Intelligence for HR Professionals, what you really need to know about the numbers. Here you go, ladies and gentlemen. If you're on YouTube right now, this is a picture of the book by Karen Berman and Joe Knight. Honestly, again, this was probably 20 years ago, right, Latoya? Can you believe I still have this on my
my business acumen one is probably so old too, but I don't care. I still have it. It's still in my book. But it was so helpful.
These are great teachers for us.
It's like and that's, Latoya, to your point too, that's another driving reason why I went for the MBA, because I remember saying HR is moving towards being a business partner with HR solutions. We're not generalists anymore. And if we're going to have these conversations, it's like, we really do have to have and increase our business acumen. But from an employee perspective, and you both have supported multiple different functions. I remember the difference of when I was working with supply chain, and it's like you had people working on the shop floor who were like, what is this? So again, it's like we have to be able to translate this language so that, people understand they're part of your company. They're a big factor in your organization. They shouldn't be shocked by these things that are going on.
Totally.
And I agree. It's like, just have a normal conversation. No offense, but you speaking in acronyms does not impress me. Like, just say it. Just break it down into common language for people.
Just simplify it.
And not to like throw shade on our friends in finance, but I'm gonna be honest, you guys could do an anti-framework version of this too, because the same slide that all of us have seen in multiple different companies, finance, like you could kind of step your game up and maybe find an easier, more palatable way to talk about how the company is performing.
In front of all employees.
We can help you develop that, because that is an opportunity.
It is a huge opportunity. They probably want that, to be honest. I have friends in finance and they can't stand speaking in acronyms all the time either. It probably drives them nuts. So no, I agree. And I think
it's about tailoring the message to who your audience is. If you're talking to the CEO and your executive C-suite,
sense
they probably all read this book or done the MBA and they understand all the terms. But if you're talking to, your frontline employees, right, that are on the shop floor or wherever you're at, we might need that meeting might need to be a little different. Those conversations should not be full of the acronyms we would be using with our CEO.
Mm-hmm. The acronyms. It's
interesting. What's that?
I used to have an acronym cheat sheet when I first started.
Yeah. Absolutely. I've had one every time that I go, like I've had to change companies, because it's just crazy. Like, how are you coming up with these things? Like, I can't keep up. Like, and then sometimes we use the same acronym, but depending on the context, it means different things. And it's like, listen, at this big age, I can't keep up. But like, first I just didn't know. And now I just don't have the brain capacity to keep up with all your acronyms. And so
I'm like, I don't care. And my favorite was like, I would start one, right? And I would message, like, on Microsoft Teams, I would like message somebody across the way. I'm like, what does this mean? And they'd write me back, I don't know. I'm like, why are you nodding your head? And I was like, so you would just sit in these meetings not knowing what that, because they're so afraid of not looking intelligent. I was like, no. I was like, this is where we got to stop. I'm like, so you are sitting in these meetings. You've been on this team longer than I have. I'm asking you what this acronym means, and you yourself don't know.
No.
I'm like, this is
nobody knows.
Madness. This is madness.
Nobody knows.
So I remember, and like this time of year used to always crack me up. I wish I kept it, but one of my old companies, I kept like a bar chart graph that I would send to my friends throughout the year. And I was like, all right, I was like, wine consumption, and it would like spike during performance. I was like, performance, I was like, I was like, oh no, like my liquor store man knows my first name, like it got, because it really is like, it's such a stressful time of year.
It is.
And unnecessarily so. But, I think, Amy, again, like shout out to the fact that we are seeing the smaller to mid-sized companies make these changes. I don't know if these big, organizations are there yet, but at least the conversations are happening. At least there's some light that we're shedding on this to say like, oh my God, like, please.
Yeah. The point is we can do it differently.
Yeah.
We can do it differently. We can re-envision this and reinvent it, to be honest. So employees are not going home and saying, it goes back to the point that you made earlier, Marcy. It's, if you just said to somebody, because you have rolling objectives, we're having conversations all the time. We're always talking about performance. If the goal or objective for the Q1 switches because of a priority shifted, we're obviously taking note of that. At the end of the day, if you say, Amy, great job this year, we're so excited, we're 3% increase, great job. That feels differently than great job, Amy, you did great. You got a meets expectation and a 3%.
Yes.
Right? Like it just feels
difference.
different. I mean, I'm going to say, difference. 3%, great. I'm going to say meets expectations.
Yeah.
Well, what do you mean? I just met. I thought I was exceeding or super exceeding or whatever. Super exceeding.
Super duper HR. What are you talking about?
I was super duper HR. What do you mean?
Like, what are you talking?
It lands differently, right?
It does.
Totally agree. And I think that, again, like the 9 box, and maybe there's like I think we should do some research. I just had an aha moment. 9 box, I think a lot of performance started on a 9 scale. Like, what is the weird thing that was going on with 9s in the 70s and the 80s?
Yeah,
like,
you're not wrong.
A lot to unpack there. We're going to have to come back to that. But now that I think about it, I'm like, a lot.
You know me, I'll go down a rabbit hole.
To like 4, right? Except for the super exceeds, which threw things off to like 5 because we didn't even need that. Like, that was just
yes.
But we shrink down. So maybe like it's Black History Month. So I'm gonna be like, I have a dream that maybe in the next year we can get to 2 boxes.
Pitch it.
And so 2 boxes in the potential and performance, 2 performances, either you met or you didn't. And then this is on behalf of all of the big enterprise companies. If we could just get a little bit closer to this, and then maybe in the near future, we could go to just a rolling thing. So maybe we'll just keep getting closer. So now I'm going to maybe reset my expectations and say, I have a dream that in the next 24 months, I can get the organization behind just 2 ratings.
Hey, and that would be a win. We'll get there. That would be a win. That would be a solid win.
Exactly. That's why I said, like, we'll set a goal by 2030. All companies are doing this. But yeah,
put it out there.
I love it. All you can do is just keep driving the conversation. And I think that the more we do that, which is why we're the Misfits, right? Because we've never been shy to push these conversations. And
that's right.
You know, and I feel for the people that are sitting in organizations right now, afraid to speak up. You know, they're afraid. I hear that a lot. It's like this fear of, you know, oh, well, I don't want to sound a certain way, or and I'm like, listen, collectively, the more we all decide that change has to happen, that, you know, we need to drive better conversations, then we start to get everybody on board. But it has to start somewhere. It has to start with these conversations and these frameworks, while, you know, good intentions, because you should always assume, hey, look, there's positive intent. You know, when we come up with these things, we genuinely want to make things better, but we have to get to a place where we agree that they start to get outdated and they actually end up getting in our way, and they don't do anything to actually help the organization from a maturity perspective. And if that happens, it's like, this is how sometimes you lose talent. You get people to this place where they're just like, well, if I don't understand how I can break out of box A to get to B or C, guess what? I'm going to go to another company that might not put me in a box. They might let me have a path.
That's right.
I'm taking the path out of the box.
And what I love about all that. Oh, sorry, Amy.
Oh, go ahead, LaToya. Go ahead.
I was just thinking, like, bringing it back to like kind of where we talk about like this kind of like HRM, like the anti-framework is like, again, maybe we start the campaign. It's anti-framework 2030. Like, it worked for a lot of other people. Like, let's do it. Let's just start a whole campaign around it.
I love it.
And
a hashtag.
It is not about saying there aren't frameworks, that it's the evolution of like moving away from doing what was because that's just what it was or what it is, and finding a fit for purpose model that works for your organization, where we are now, and what are you trying to actually accomplish. Like, that's what I love about like where we've said, okay, well, we have a framework, but it's about deconstructing frameworks that have always been just because that's just what it is. Instead, let's figure out what really works and make it work for you.
That's right. I love that you said that, LaToya, because that's exactly, you know, I think where I was going to take this, which is, again, tongue in cheek and the anti-framework. But the truth is, we're not anti-framework, right? We are, you know, courage over compliance. We're trying to avoid blind adherence. We want you to question the frameworks, right? So that's really where we're going. And the truth is, we as HR Misfits and the HR Misfits collective have actually developed a framework that we feel really strongly about. So it's kind of tongue in cheek that it's anti-framework. We have developed a framework that we believe is, I think, really important for our function as we move forward. So Marcy, why don't you talk a little bit about that before we close out our time together today?
So, you know, and I love, it's almost like how we think about how to solve the ungoogable, right? Or, you know, something you can't just immediately plug into ChatGPT and say, boom, I have my answer. And so obviously everybody knows, I think at this point who's listening in, that we're anti-compliance and theater, you know, in terms of, you know, everything being focused on HR being the policy police. You know, of course, we're not going to come in and blow everything up and leave you in destruction, but it's almost like how we can think about a containment strategy. And that's ultimately what we've talked about for our framework. It's just, we understand that when crisis hits, it's like, we're going to apply this framework that's going to help you, but we're going to do it in hours, not months. We're not going to drag this out. This is going to be like this, oh my gosh, I have this framework that's going to actually halt you for the next several months to a year. We want to be able to work fast. And so what I love about the framework we've created is around deconstruct, diffuse, and design. And I think for us, it's just, we are going to get under the hood, and the three of us have that mentality. It's like and LaToya, you mentioned this. It's like, no, what is actually happening here? Like, let's get under the hood. And Amy, you're huge on this. I know. It's like, stop with the corporate jargon, stop with the political posturing, because ultimately that's not helping you get to the root cause. So we do agree that these frameworks might be necessary, but I like to think that ours is moving in a little bit more of a modern direction where we can sort of stop that bleeding immediately if there's crisis management. And we are the types that we're just going to say it. Like, do you need a script? Sure. But we're going to maybe help you neutralize it before you get it hot off the press. Because a lot of times I know leaders are like, well, I want talking points, or I need to. And sometimes you need a script for the unsayable. So I think this is what's great, is that, our framework is not just around, okay, we can draft this. It's like, no, we actually will have a containment strategy for you, and we're going to help you with future state. So I think the biggest thing that I would say, and feel free, both of you, to jump in, is we want the mentality around the framework of like, how do we ensure this doesn't happen again? We don't want the repeatable. We want to be able to come in and help solve, not just around policy and be the policy police, but we want to be that blueprint for structural change, So it's really helping you evolve your leadership teams, your systems, making sure you're resilient to this type of complexity. So it's the ongoing joke. We talk about frameworks, but this framework is one that we said is a framework, but the anti-framework.
That's right. This is the HRM advisory method framework. If you'd like to learn more about this, HR folks, leaders, managers, CEOs, we want to hear from you. We would love to share this framework more with you, that we really believe is, again, not just a framework for the sake of having a framework. The whole point is really about, elevating your business, elevating your people. I think that we've built something really great here, and we're excited to share it. And I think it's going to be super impactful. So thank you, everybody, for your time today. Thanks, Marcy, for kind of sharing that. LaToya, thank you for taking us all the way back to 1970 with GE's 9-box. It's always an adventure with you and with the HR Misfits. And we appreciate your time. Everybody have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to HR Misfits, where people leadership gets real. If this conversation resonated with you, follow the show and subscribe wherever you watch or listen. And if you're a leader navigating complex, high-stakes people decisions, we're also building the HR Misfits Collective, a place for real counsel, not HR theater. You can find us online at www.thehrmisfits.com.